You awakened to the distant ringing of temple bells, their sound heavy and measured, wrapping around you like a thick, unseen shroud. The air felt dense, saturated with the damp scent of aging papyrus and the sharp, lingering aroma of incense burned longer than necessary. Beneath your bare feet, the cool stone floor pressed firmly, smooth and worn by countless footsteps, each step stirring echoes through the narrow corridor where sunlight barely dared to reach. The rough walls, stained with patches of moisture and desert dust, seemed to close in softly, enclosing you in a silent, ancient embrace as you prepared for the day's ritual. You breathed in the faint musk of resin mingled with cooled stone, the chill cutting gently through your linen garment, clinging loosely to your skin. Your fingers traced the delicate edges of the small statuette of Thoth, protector of wisdom, its surface cool and polished, a constant comfort amid the uncertainty. Around you, the subtle swish of linen curtains, shifting with the breeze, wove a quiet rhythm, a muted soundtrack to your morning, as you settled into your unchanging task. The temple's silence carried a weight different from what modern ears might understand. Today, a phone battery dying might provoke frustration. Here, the fading light of day might signal an end far more absolute, and the last flicker of warmth, a fleeting hope lost beneath the unyielding desert sun. Your life, threaded through hours spent unraveling whispered secrets, trapped within dreams. That fragile realm where symbols spoke louder than words, and a single misstep could mean swift, silent doom. Your eyes scanned the delicate ink strokes on the papyrus beside you, following the looping shapes that held riddles you had learned to decode with painstaking care. Outside the temple, the faint murmur of distant prayers mingled with the occasional clatter of sandals on stones, a reminder of the world beyond this shadowed sanctuary. Yet here, time stretched, thick and slow, each heartbeat measured carefully against the steady beating of unseen drums. As you gently cleaned the statuette once more, a ritual within the ritual, the chill of the stones seeped deeper into your bones. You felt the rhythm of your breaths deepen, slow, taking refuge in the repetition that both grounded and bound you. The air sweetened faintly with the rising sun, casting muted gold over cracked frescoes that traced the rise and fall of forgotten gods. Outside, a sudden hush fell over the temple grounds. The usual chorus of barking dogs stilled, their absence a silence heavier than any sound had been. Somewhere among the hushed figures, moving just beyond the stone walls, a glance passed between two servants, quick, loaded, and unspoken. The weight of that moment tightened the air around you, an invisible thread pulling taut your already frail calm. You could feel it, something shifting just beneath the surface of your quiet world, a shadow stretching its fingers longer into your fragile sanctuary. The day's routine seemed suddenly fragile, like the flickering flame of a candle in the desert wind, threatening to gutter out without warning. Still, your hands returned to the papyrus, to the slow motion of tracing symbols that might hold a key or a curse. Hey, before Morpheus fully claims you, make sure you're still subscribed. For some, the button has vanished, and I wouldn't want you to miss the next sleep stories. Take a moment and leave a soft like a pillow's gentle embrace. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. Your interaction keeps this corner of calm alive. Thanks for being part of it. You stood there for a long moment, your breath steadying as the silence stretched like a taut thread around you. The sudden stillness beyond the temple walls sent a shiver down your spine, a whisper of something unseen brushing past the edges of your awareness. Each breath entered heavy with the scent of dry earth and lingering smoke, as though the desert itself exhaled slow secrets into your lungs. The daylight filtered weakly through the narrow slits carved in the stone, casting thin ribbons of warmth across your hands. Your fingers still lingered on the small statuette, the polished surface cool against your skin, anchoring you in the thick quiet that pressed heavy as dusk. Outside, the temple's usual life faltered like a candle sputtering against a lazy breeze. The soft echo of footsteps faded, pauses nesting between them like stones settling on ancient ground. You stepped forward slowly, the pressure of the worn floor stones grounding your movement. Each footfall was deliberate, a gentle scrape against the cool surface, stirring faint dust motes that floated in the shaft of pale sun. The air was laden with a delicate mixture of old resin and the dry tang of sand, sharp but not unpleasant, just persistent enough to make you breathe more deeply as you moved. Behind the veil of your linen garment, the roughness of stones seeped through the soles of your feet, cold enough to pull a faint sigh from your lips. Ahead, the corridor stretched narrow and shadowed, the walls marked by streaks of age, mud and mineral bleeding down in thin veins, like muted veins under fragile skin. The faintest breeze stirred again, pressing the linen curtains on either side, their soft swish a whispered companion to your solitary passage. As you walked, your eyes sought solace in the familiar tapestries, faded and frayed, their patterns half lost to time, but still whispering stories you'd learn to read with patient care. Every muscle tensed slightly as a flicker of movement caught your attention. A shift in the light, a breath held somewhere close but out of sight. The temple's air had thickened, shadows folded into shadows, and the sacred silence felt fragile, as if the very stones might crack under the weight of unspoken things. Your heart beat slow and measured, matching the rhythm of the distant bells that mourned beyond the walls, their toll threading through the stillness with a grave insistence. You paused Beside, a narrow alcove carved into the stone, fingers tracing the rough edges where countless hands had rested before. The faint scent of incense filled the air anew, clinging like a soft veil, a scent tinged with bittersweet smoke that clouded your thoughts as you knelt to adjust the small offerings laid with trembling hands. Dust settled on your skin like gentle snowfall, and the heat of the desert, faint through the stones, felt remote, an ember dimming beneath the weight of your quiet resolve. A soft shuffle echoed behind you, tentative and thin. You held your breath, stilling your body so as not to disturb the tense calm. The sound came again, a barely there shift of fabric and low breath, a presence waiting just beyond your senses. You could almost feel eyes watching from the narrow dark, unseen but felt, curious, wary, calculating. Your pulse ticked softly, a slow drum under the endless silence. You moved then, the slow, careful motion of lifting your staff from where it leaned, the wood cold and familiar in your grasp. It felt heavier than before, the knowledge of what lay ahead, nesting in its grain. The walls seemed to breathe around you, the air thick with anticipation and the memories of long-forgotten prayers inscribed faintly in the chipped stone beneath your feet. With a deep inhale, you pressed forward, every step a deliberate action against the creeping weight of the day's unfolding mystery. Past the corridor's bend, the temple opened wide into a chamber suffused with pale light from above. Cracked frescoes blurred into one another, their colors washed down by time until they resembled faded dreams. Yet, beneath quiet surfaces, you sensed the pulse of something vital, an ancient heartbeat barely stirring. Here, the air was cooler, the scent of wet stone mingled with dust, and something softer, like the faintest trace of jasmine caught in the wind. You let your fingers glide across the rough wall, feeling the texture change beneath your skin, from jagged to smooth, worn by hands that had come seeking answers long before you. The breeze teased the heavy curtains that hung in strips, their edges frayed and fluttering like old whispers. The sound it made was a quiet susurrus of silk, a song of patience and waiting. Your eyes caught a movement near the far end, the barely perceptible shift of something, someone, hidden by shadow and light. You remained still, the waiting stretching between moments as if the whole temple held its breath with you. And then, just a fraction of a breath later, a low murmur began to rise, a voice, scarcely more than a thread of sound, weaving through the silence like smoke through fingers. It was a call, fragile yet demanding, pulling at some slumbering edge of your consciousness. You felt the stir of old instincts, a tightening coil of awareness wound slowly and carefully. The morning's calm had cracked, a hairline fracture spreading beneath your feet, and you knew with a quiet certainty that the day ahead held secrets that would not yield easily. You shifted your weight, the whisper of your linen brushing against stone, the faint scrape of your staff marking your passage through that hallowed stillness. Ahead, the shadows churned gently, secrets folding over each other like layers of worn papyrus, waiting for your touch to unravel them. Your breath slowed again, the rhythm deep and steady, but beneath that calm, the pulse of urgency began to rise, a quiet warning wrapped tight in the temple's ancient heart. And just as you reached out, fingers trembling with a mix of fear and resolve, the chamber's faint echoes faltered, and a single, sharp sound cut clean through the tension. A distant voice speaking your name, low and clear, breaking the fragile quiet around you. You stood motionless a moment longer, the muted voice fading like the last breath of incense, and the temple's heavy hush pressed closer, folding around you like a worn, familiar cloth. The air was cool, yet held the faintest flicker of warmth from the sun's retreating caress. Your palms brushed the rough stone at your side, each grain pressing stories beneath your skin, silent yet insistent. The lingering scent of jasmine mixed with dust, thin ribbons of fragrance pulling you deeper into the stillness. Slowly, you turned toward the far side of the chamber, where shadows lengthened and walls thickened with silence. Each step felt deliberate, a measured pace that matched the slow tolling in your chest, the ancient rhythm rooted not only in you, but in the stones themselves, etched with prayers whispered long before. The rough floor pressed cold beneath your bare feet. Slight imperfections struck delicate taps, notes carried by the gentle breeze shifting the tattered linen curtains. Their whisper, a fragile thread weaving between sound and silence. Your fingers curled lightly around the wooden staff, its aged surface cool and grained, marking your passage as if the temple itself recognized this moment. A shiver slipped down your spine, subtle yet clear, the weight of unseen eyes unwinding in the quiet corners. You inhaled deeply, drawing in the blend of resin, dry earth, and faded lotus petals, the scents mingling like a tapestry of memory. And time, with each breath, the air seemed to thicken, a soft oppression laying a gentle claim on your senses, urging caution. Ahead, a shattered fresco caught the weak light, the cracked pigments tracing the outlines of gods long forgotten, their visages blurred, yet haunting. You lifted a hand slowly, fingertips brushing the jagged lines as if you could read their story through touch alone. The stone beneath thrummed faintly, an almost imperceptible pulse vibrating through your bones. The temple seemed to hold its breath with you, awaiting some silent cue. You stepped around the corner then, where the corridor clipped into deeper shadows, the scant daylight retreating like a careful sentinel. The walls here bore heavier stains, streaks of mineral and dust, mingled like faded tears on weathered skin. A faint scrape broke the stillness, a hesitant, nearly swallowed sound as something pressed softly against the stone, almost imperceptible. Your breath caught, shallow and slow, the cool air dampening the slight tremor in your fingers. The silence stretched taut, every slowed heartbeat ringing in your ears. You instinctively pressed closer to the wall, the roughness grounding you, a tangible anchor amid the unseen pressure that pooled like dark water in the space between. You felt the sudden prick of sweat along your spine, the linen across your shoulders tightening insignificantly. A subtle echo of tension, the faintest flicker of movement, startled you. Somewhere just beyond the veil of shadow, an almost imperceptible shift, the whisper of fabric settling, a brush of breath held steady against the stillness. You filled your chest slow, the dry grip of alertness settling like a weight, and you pressed your steps softer, sliding forward as a cat might in faded moonlight. The scent of burning resin deepened alongside the distant hum of murmured prayers, a low, constant drone threading through the air, unbroken and unyielding. Your hand sought the statuette of Thoth, hanging from your linen, fingers curling around its cool, polished surface. The familiarity steadied your flickering resolve, the tiny weight pressing calm into your palm. You allowed yourself a slow blink, eyes tracing the wild tapestry of shadows playing at the edges of your vision, each one like a secret waiting to be uncovered or left forgotten. The quiet crept nearer, a pulsing presence folded into the temple's deep lungs, expanding with careful patience. Treading forward cautiously, you reached a wide threshold where the chamber opened beneath a fractured dome. Pale sunlight spilled in uneven splotches, catching flecks of dust that danced languidly in the still air. The walls here bore faint traces of delicate lotus blossoms, curling softly in colors dulled but gentle. A warm breeze stirred silk threads hanging from the archways, their flutter an echo of distant life outside this silent sanctuary. Your breath filled steadily, and you let your other hand rise to steady yourself against the cool stone. The texture beneath your skin shifted. Rough patches where years of wear had smoothed corners, worn lines that felt like the very pulse of the temple's memory. The chill crept slow but certain up your arm, anchoring you in this fragile moment between what was and what might become. From the far corner, a shadow detached itself slowly, peeling away without sound, slipping forward like a quiet question. You held your breath, muscles attuned and still, heart inching its pace as the presence grew clearer. A figure swathed in linen like you, movements deliberate, eyes reflecting a muted urgency. The air thickened with expectation. A faint thrum surfaced in your ears, low and insistent. The wood grip of your staff nestled firm between your fingers, its familiarity a tether amid uncertainty. Your gaze locked with the figures, and in that taut quiet, shadows folded, and the temple's ancient secrets stirred, waiting to reveal the next thread in your unfolding path. Then, before words could form or steps could carry you forward, the distant ringing of bells re-emerged, sharper now, slicing the silence with purpose. You felt it in your bones. The day's fragile calm had cracked wide open, and something long buried was reaching out through the shadowed veil, calling, waiting, and impossible to ignore. The distant bells had faded into a faint glow of sound behind you, a soft pulse that lingered just beyond your skin's edges. You shifted your weight lightly, barely perceptible, as the temple's heavy silence wrapped you once more. The air, cool but thick with the scent of dry earth and old incense, pressed against your lungs like a whispered secret. The faint warmth, lingering from the sun's pull, retreated gradually, pulling shadows longer and deeper, cocooning the chamber in a soft, muted embrace. Your fingers tightened briefly around the wooden staff, the familiar grain rough against your palm, solid and grounding. Each heartbeat echoed in your ears, slow and deliberate, counting time in the hollow quiet where no wind stirred. The shifting shadow had not moved. Still, a presence folded into the far corner's hush, watching. You breathed out slowly, feeling your breath mingle with the desert's dust and the faintest trace of jasmine that drifted through the cracked stone archways. The floor beneath your feet was cool now, slick in places with years of accumulated dust and faint, forgotten trails. Tiny specks of sand clung between worn floor tiles, catching what little light struggled through the narrow openings above. A faint scrape brushed against the stone, soft as a sigh, and you froze, every muscle taut in silent awareness. The temple bore its ancient weight on your shoulders, pressing down gently, as though guarding the delicate line between what had been and what might come. You moved with deliberate hush, staff tapping lightly in measured rhythm, shadow casting long fingers across the faded frescoes. The skeletal outlines of lotus flowers curled softly along cracked plaster, pale greens and washed blues breathing faded life into the stillness. The dust stirred in gentle clouds as you stepped, sparkling in sleepy motes under the fractured dome. Light seemed hesitant here, a reluctant visitor, casting pools that melted slowly into shadowed corners. A slow breath escaped your lips as you traced your fingertips along the cool wall. The stone told its story beneath your touch, rough where ancient hands once sought permission, smooth where time had worn the edges like softened silk. Beneath this gentle pressure, the vibrations of long-past prayers thrummed faintly, a heartbeat buried deep beneath the temple's stone ribs. Your mind clung to that rhythm, slow, steady, anchoring you in the fragile moment suspended between awareness and quiet dread, the faint murmur returned. A thread of sound, almost too soft to grasp, weaving through the temple's hollow chest. Your gaze snapped toward the far end of the chamber. The shadow moved again, lighter now, a delicate stirring like the ripple of linen sliding along stone. You held your breath and let your footsteps slow, shifting with the ghost of movements unseen but felt. The scent of resin deepened, thickening the air with the sharp sweetness of burning sap, tethering you to the present, while the past whispered just beyond. The figure stepped forward tentatively. Linen folds glided like slow shadows, the diminished light softening every edge. You caught the faint flash of eyes, cautious, searching, waited with unspoken urgency. The air between you seemed to pulse, thick and electric, woven from strands of expectation and silent question. Your grip on the staff tightened imperceptibly, the wood, both shield and talisman, amid the fragile stillness. A distant breath brushed the temple air, followed swiftly by the echo of footsteps just beyond walls unseen. The steady pulse of bells returned faintly, threading a new cadence through the space, sharper now, insistent beneath the hush. Your heart quickened, matching the rhythm, each beat a steady drum that drove you forward, deeper into the mystery unfolding like restless silk curling in shadows. You took a step closer, the stone cold beneath your bare foot, its chill blooming slowly through the fibers of your linen. The frescoes showed faint traces of forgotten gods, their colors muted, but still whispered stories you longed to decipher. Your fingers traced the fractured paint, the cool dust clinging like sleepy ghosts as you paused to inhale the mingled scents. Earth cooled by the morning, resin thick and sweet, the whisper of jasmine lingering like a sigh. The temple held its breath with you, each sound a fragile thread in the thick tapestry of silence. A tremor brushed your spine, light and sudden, as the figure's gaze locked with yours, eyes reflecting the ancient light, cool and unreadable. Time stretched thin, suspended between beats. The world slowed beneath the cracked dome, waiting on a single breath. The shadow's lips parted slightly, a faint sound like the ghost of words, unheard but heavy with meaning. You felt the thin thread of tension twist, tightening into a silent knot that nestled deep beneath your calm exterior. Your staff scraped softly against stone as your hand moved reflexively, steadying. The air thickened, every breath a slow climb of effort. The murmur swelling beyond the temple walls grew, faint but insistent. Prayers carried on the wind, a distant clatter of sandals disturbed from usual rhythm. The dull weight of anticipation pressed closer, your senses sharpened to points of fragile light. Then, as if breaking a long-held spell, a sudden sharp sound cracked through the stillness. A whispered word, low and clear, calling your name from the shadowed depths. Your eyes widened, searching the dim corners where the voice had vanished like mist. The temple walls seemed to pulse with that single thread of sound, vibrating in time with your thudding heart. You stood frozen a moment longer, the silence folding tight around you once more. The shadows deepened, the stale air thick with expectation and secrets long buried beneath layers of stone and silence. Outside, the temple grounds held their breath, still and waiting. You felt the careful weight of ancient eyes watching, patient and unyielding. Your fingers curled tighter around the staff, knuckles pale against the smooth, worn wood. The delicate scent of incense mingled with jasmine and dust, wrapping you in a quiet embrace that both comforted and warned. You took a steadying breath, the weight of what was to come nesting deep in your bones, slow and certain. And then, from the farthest shadows, a soft, deliberate approach began. Footsteps, barely there, but impossible to ignore, moved toward you. The tense stillness cracked with silent urgency. The temple's slow heart beating faster beneath the fractured dome. You felt the cool stone floor beneath you shift, the air thick with a heavy insistence. At the edge of vision, a flicker, a figure stepping from darkness into the dim light, carrying the fragile weight of secrets you were only beginning to understand. The day's quiet had shattered completely. The figure stepped closer, the pale folds of their linen robe whispering softly against the stone floor. A quiet sound that barely stirred the heavy air around you. Your breath caught, each inhalation slow and deliberate, filling your lungs with the mingled scents of resin and dry earth, layered now with the faint sweetness of jasmine that clung like a fading memory. The faint light from above traced the edges of their form, casting half-glimpsed shadows that seemed to ripple with the quiet pull of ancient stories, as if the temple itself exhaled a long-held secret. Your fingers tightened around the worn staff, the grain rough and familiar beneath your palm, a steady reminder of the path you had been walking these countless hours. The cool stone beneath your bare feet pressed upward, grounding you amidst the whispering silence. You could feel the temple's weight settling around you, a slow, patient breath held in the space between heartbeats. The air trembled lightly, a delicate pulse threading through the stillness, like the soft toll of bells ringing far beyond the walls. Steps came closer, less hesitant now, each one a delicate scrape against the time-worn floor that echoed faintly in the vast chamber. Your eyes lifted slowly to meet those cautious ones, reflecting a quiet urgency and shadowed questions yet unspoken. The figure's gaze held steady yet unreadable. A flicker of something ancient stirred in that silent exchange, like a whispered invitation falling just out of reach. The cool breath of the temple brushed softly across your skin, stirring the linen folds and catching the faint dust motes settled in the lingering light. You stepped forward then, each movement slow, deliberate, a careful dance with the shadows that pooled deeper around the fractured dome. The rough plaster beneath your fingertips told stories in jagged lines. Chipped frescoes whispered of gods forgotten, their faces blurred by time, yet still exuding a strange, insistent presence. The gentle breeze swayed the delicate threads of hanging curtains, their edges fraying like thin echoes carried on a desert wind. Each breath you took was thick with incense and the dry musk of stone, sun-warmed through centuries, grounding you in the temple's slow heartbeat. A shift in the air came, a subtle tightening, like the quiet drawing of a thread through fragile fabric. Your staff pressed firm against the cool floor as you listened, the faintest murmur rising from the shadowed recesses. A voice, soft but insistent, weaving through the heavy silence like smoke curling from a dying fire. The figure's eyes glanced toward the far wall, where a faint scratch disturbed the stillness. A sound so light it could have been a trick of the temple's own breath. Shadows folded over shadows here, concealing hidden spaces, secrets tucked beneath layers of dust and prayer. The temple's breath hung heavy with expectation. Time seemed to waver, stretched thin like a worn scroll unfurling slowly in the quiet air. Your pulse beat steady, a slow drum beneath the thick cloak of anticipation. And then the delicate scent of jasmine deepened, mingling with the sharp tang of burning resin, weaving a fragile thread that tied past to present. The figure's gaze met yours again, the unspoken question hanging, waiting, a silent promise that would not be denied. You moved closer still, the cold floor pressing through your linen sandals as steps fell in measured rhythm. Your hand brushed once more over the small statuette of Thoth hanging from your neck, its polished surface cool, a talisman against the darkening tide of unknowns. The temple held you as much as you held it, each breath a silent vow carried between dust and light. The frescoes seemed to lean in, colors fading, but the stories alive beneath cracked plaster, tracing patterns in your mind as if urging you forward. The figure finally spoke, the words so low that you felt them more than heard them. A soft breath, carrying a name, a summons, a fragile plea. The sound seemed to ripple through the chamber's depths, stirring the ancient dust like a disturbed pool. You caught the rising tension in your chest, a coil tightening slowly with the weight of what lay beyond the temple's walls. The faint clatter of sandals echoed from distant corridors, the murmurs of awakened voices threading through the stone bones of the sanctuary. Your eyes lingered on the figure's face, catching a flicker of desperation beneath their calm resolve. This was no mere visitor. A story had begun, one woven by shadows and the slow, methodical unfolding of the sands outside. You felt the cool air thicken with whispered warnings and the hesitant promise of revelation, the temple itself seeming to wait, breathless and taut. on the edge of a fragile dawn. Then, without warning, a sudden shudder rolled through the ground, a vibration barely perceptible beneath your feet, yet enough to stir the dust motes into restless dance. The distant bells tolled once more, sharper, more insistent, threading a new urgency through the quiet. You and the figure exchanged a glance, heavy with unspoken understanding. The fragile thread between you, taut and ready to snap. The cool shadow detached itself fully from the wall, stepping forward with quiet purpose. Your fingers gripped the staff until whitened, knuckles pale against the worn wood. The air seemed to pulse around you both, thick with the weight of secrets poised to unravel. Outside, the temple's ancient stones held a breath long withheld, and in that space, suspended between light and shadow, a new path began to open. Unseen but deeply felt, drawing you forward into a silence no longer safe to hold. Something beneath the stillness stirred, a presence not yet seen but palpably close. Your heart slowed, then quickened, an echo rolling deep within. The day's fragile calm had shattered completely. The figure's gaze remained steady, holding a quiet plea woven beneath layers of shadowed linen folds. You felt the cold, rough stone pressing through the thin soles of your sandals as your steps drew closer, the air thickening beneath the fractured dome where pale sunlight fought to hold its place. The temple's breath seemed to slow, each whispered note of impending time lingering, stretched thin like the fragile threads of a once vibrant tapestry. Your fingers brushed again over the smooth surface of the statuette of Thoth that hung against your chest, its weight a subtle anchor. The scent of resin burned low somewhere deeper in the temple, mingling with the dry musk of centuries-old dust, casting a fine veil over the moment. Your breath came slow and steady, matching the tentative rhythm of the footsteps slipping soundlessly around you. A faint rustle echoed softly, barely more than a sigh, and yet it unraveled the silence that had held the chamber frozen. The figure shifted slightly, casting a glance to the far corner where shadows stirred like breath between stone walls. A thread of jasmine twined in the air, as if to soothe the taut tension gripping your limbs. You noticed the faded frescoes close by, lines blurred and softened by time, their muted blues and greens folding into mottled earth tones, whispering stories just beyond reach. You stepped through the thin lattice of light and shadow, each movement deliberate as dust motes trembled in the fragile rays. Your heel scraped gently against the worn floor, the cool grit pressing patiently beneath your skin, grounding you as the temple's silence held its fragile vigil. The distant toll of bells pulsed faintly in your mind, a spectral rhythm echoing beyond the thick stone walls, urging a steady heartbeat. The figure's eyes met yours again, an unreadable moment stretched taut between cautious trust and unspoken weight. Their hand lifted slowly, fingers curling around a narrow scroll frayed at the edges, unraveling a layer of time with each careful inch. The scent of old papyrus unfurled, mingling with resin and a hint of something raw. Earth turned beneath restless feet. You felt the rise of a soft wind brush past the broken dome's edge, stirring hanging silk threads that slipped like whispered promises through your periphery. The shifting curtains caught pale flashes of sun, casting gentle patterns over the rough stone. The dusty air was sweetened faintly by the bloom of cracked lotus petals, delicate and faded, threading ancient breath into the moment. With deliberate care, you reached toward a carved alcove nearby, its edges worn smooth from countless hands seeking comfort or guidance, and rested your palm against its cool surface. The stone hummed faintly beneath your touch, as though carrying a secret pulse lost to all but those willing to listen. A soft echo of distant prayers, murmured voices barely stirring air, curling like warm smoke around your awareness. Suddenly, an imperceptible shift caught your senses, a subtle change in the temple's rhythm. The figure's eyes flickered toward a shadowed alcove across the chamber, where the flickering light hesitated, uncertain, your breath caught in delicate silence. The thin thread of tension twined slowly tighter, as if the very air awaited. A summons long promised, but never spoken aloud. Each step you took folded quietly into the thick stillness. The firm tap of your staff, an ancient beat upon the stone floor. The scent of burnt resin deepened, its faint sweetness growing sharp beneath a whisper of dry desert winds threading through unseen cracks in the walls. A low, almost inaudible rustle drifted near, and you sensed a presence lurking, patient, watching, deliberate. Your heart slowed to a measured space between beats, the coolness beneath your feet drawing you deeper into the temple's embrace. A breath of jasmine rose again, subtle as a fading pulse, brushing against your skin and settling quietly across the worn tapestry of memories. The frescoes' colors seemed to ripple faintly in the light, pulled taut by some unseen tension. The figure stepped forward, linen whispering, like the gentle unfolding of time itself, carrying with them a careful resolve etched into every measured movement. Your gaze held fast, tracing the slow arc of history wrapped tight in the tendrils of dust and silence. The room seemed to inhale with you, suspended between the fragile calm and a rising current of quiet urgency. A sharp peal of bells rang out suddenly, slicing through the stillness, a sound both ancient and immediate. The temple trembled slightly beneath your bare feet, dust falling gently like the softest snow from cracked archways. The figure's eyes darkened with a sudden clarity, shadows deepening as if the fractured light were folding inward. You exchanged a glance weighted with unknowable promises. Everything you had known, the long hours tracing symbols, the soft scent of incense and resin, the uneasy rhythm of prayers, tightened into a single thread of shared understanding. The temple's breath held steady, but outside the walls, winds stirred anew, carrying with them whispers of change that even the stones dared not deny. Your staff tapped a slow, steady cadence into the quiet, each touch a spoken vow, a mark pressed into the shifting sands of fate. Beneath the fractured dome, the peeling frescoes seemed to lean in closer, as if urging you forward, beckoning toward a secret held just beyond sight. The day's fragile equilibrium had shattered completely, and the path ahead was cloaked in shadow, waiting, calling. In the far corner, where light faltered and time tangled like threadbare cloth, the figure's lips moved once more, the softest utterance reverberating like a faint drumbeat beneath the ancient stones. Your breath held, taut, expectant, and you understood with unyielding certainty. The next step would unfold into silence, yet the echo of it would resound long after. The temple's stillness broke suddenly beneath your feet, the stones humming with a secret that had waited centuries. And just as you reached to respond, a slow, deliberate sound slipped from the shadows. A heartbeat, poised between calm and storm, drawing you deeper into the silence that would not release you. You stood rooted for a moment longer, the lingering echo of your name sinking into the thick air and dissolving into the shadowed corners of the chamber. The temple held its breath, heavy and still, wrapping around you like a vast, silent tide that pressed your skin inward and weighed your thoughts down into the slow, settling dust. Your bare feet counted time against the cold floor, the stones whispering faintly beneath you, their chill seeping through the woven threads of your linen sandals, marking the passage of moments that stretched like thin smoke. Your fingers tightened once more around the familiar grain of your staff, the worn wood solid beneath your palm, grounding you as your breath traced slow, deliberate arcs into the stillness. The faint scent of burning resin mingled with dry earth, a dry sweetness curling like smoke that reached into your nostrils and settled soft and deep. Somewhere far away, the mournful tolling of the bells began again, sharper now, slicing through lingering shadows as if the temple's very walls sought to wake something long asleep. You moved then, each step cautious and measured, drawing the stolen warmth of light into your bones as you crossed the cracked thresholds of quiet rooms. The frescoes overhead bled faded colors, the delicate blossoms of lotus petals curled and frayed along ancient plaster, their shapes hinting at stories half remembered. Your fingertips brushed the rough stone walls, carrying the weight of age beneath the surface. Streaks of dust and mineral glided across your skin, like the breath of time itself. The figure followed silently, footsteps as soft as falling sands, their presence woven into the slow heartbeat of the temple. Every sound was swallowed between the thick folds of shadow, the fragile walls holding the space as if it were a delicate secret. A faint stirring of linen accompanied the shifting air, the almost imperceptible blending of breath and movement that pressed against your senses like a quiet promise. Ahead, the chamber opened under the fractured dome, where shards of sunlight spilled through cracks above, catching dust into shimmering pools of gold. The air here was cooler, heavy with the scent of wet stone and a faint, elusive hint of jasmine, like a memory drifting on a breeze long carried away. You rested, your hand against the worn altar, the cold surface rough, uneven, with faint carvings, faded beneath layers of dust and decades. Pressure mounted in your chest, a slow tightening, matched by the tremor of the rough floor beneath your heels. The distant bells resumed their toll, a slow drum calling through the silence, threading through the hollow bones of the temple's heart. You glanced toward the figure, their eyes catching the muted light, the lines of their face etched with an urgency delicate as silk, but as unyielding as the desert wind outside. In the hush, the faintest scraping stirred at the edge of your awareness, a subtle shift in the shadows where the temple wall met stone floor. Your breath caught, a whisper passed over the air, low and urgent, curling like threadbare silk, trailing through your thoughts. Your fingers sought the statuette of Thoth hanging near your heart, the cool metal anchoring your steadying pulse. Step by slow step, you and the figure moved deeper into the recesses of the temple's labyrinth, where light faltered and shadows thickened into slow pools of quiet dread. The scent of burning resin grew sharper, mingling with the dry, dusty musk of ancient stones and the soft decay of papyrus crumbling slowly beneath countless silent hands. The walls echoed faint murmurs, prayers swallowed long ago but caught in the membranes of time. You paused beside a fractured mosaic, your fingers tracing the cracked tiles with slow reverence, feeling the rugged edges press into your skin, every jagged line a story half left untold and trembling beneath centuries of forgotten breath. The gentle flutter of linen curtains teased a tender cadence, the soft susurrus wrapping around you like a whispered chant meant only for your ears. A distant murmur surfaced then, threading through the stagnant air, a voice barely more than a breath, calling a name like a fragile pulse reaching through a veil. Your heart tightened, a slow coil, drawing taut with the weight of unspoken warnings. The figure's gaze flickered to the source, their hand rising with hesitant resolve to the narrow scroll cradled close, worn and creased with the age of its secrets. The temple's skin seemed to quiver beneath the weight of countless eyes, watchful, patient. Shadows melted into one another as if aware, as if the very stones yearned to unfold the mysteries veiled in their ancient embrace. You breathed deeply, letting the scent of jasmine and resin mingle, the quiet heat of the day softening the harsh outline of fear into something near to hope. A subtle tremor passed beneath your bare feet, delicate but insistent, stirring the dust layers like memories roused from long slumber. The tolling bells sharpened once more, their sound piercing the thick veil as a final summons. Your fingers gripped the staff until the wood bit into your palm, a silent promise etched in every measured step. Then, from the darkest corner of the chamber, a narrow beam of light caught a glint, a small object shifting just beyond sight. Your breath stalled. Weight balanced on the precipice of revelation and dread. The figure's lips parted with a soft murmur, their voice threading through the ancient air, a sound both invitation and warning. You stretched your hand forward, fingers trembling with weighty anticipation, the cool texture of stone beneath you grounding every inch of your being. The temple held its breath with you. Outside, beyond the confines of this sacred silence, the first gusts of an unspoken storm began to stir. And as your fingers brushed the unseen object, a slow, deliberate crack shattered the stillness, a fracture spreading quietly through the walls, through time itself, unfolding secrets that had waited beneath the sand for a dawn never before dared. You held in that moment, heart suspended on the cusp of what was known and what was yet to come. And the path ahead glimmered faintly, shadowed but alive, whispering promises you could neither resist nor fully understand. You stepped back from the worn altar, the rough stone beneath your palm, cool and grounding as you inhaled slowly, the mingled scents of jasmine and resin thickening in the still air. Dust particles drifted lazily in the fractured light, swirling in slow, endless circles that somehow slowed time itself. The faint echo of the bells reverberated, their measured toll threading through the chamber like a heartbeat drawn from the very bones of the temple. Your bare feet pressed firmly into the cold floor, the surfaces uneven yet solid, a map of countless journeys taken and secrets held beneath. Ahead, the shadowed figure lingered near the threshold, their eyes fixed on the delicate patterns faded along the cracked fresco. You felt the weight of their gaze deepen, quiet but urgent, a whispered plea carried in the trembling folds of linen. Each breath you took seemed to stir the scent of dust and burning sap, wrapping you tighter into the breathless cocoon of this place, where silence was both sanctuary and warning. Slowly, deliberately, you stepped forward, the cool floor meeting your soles in a gentle reminder of the passage of centuries. The breeze stirred faintly through the torn curtains, weaving a soft susurrus around your legs, as if the temple itself exhaled a breath held far too long. Your fingertips brushed against the chipped stones lining the archways, tracing the uneven edges with slow reverence. The texture, rough beneath your skin, like the delicate creases of old parchment. The figure shifted, the soft scrape of sandals stirring a whisper of movement that seemed amplified in the deep stillness. Your pulse slowed as your eyes met theirs once more, a fragile connection tethered to the shadows between light and dark. The temple's hush deepened, tightening around you, pressing a solemn weight into the space between two cautious steps. A faint murmur wandered through the air, a voice threading its way from the depths of the chamber, like smoke curling from a dying ember. You strained to catch its fragile melody, words too soft to grasp, yet heavy with unspoken meaning. Your fingers tightened around the handle of your staff, the worn grain pressing cool reassurance into your palm as you leaned into the slow unfolding of the moment. The walls seemed to listen, every crack and fissure resonating with memory, waiting for the next step, as if the temple's heartbeat synced with your own. Light shifted subtly, casting long shadows that flickered like distant flames along the cracked plaster. The scent of lotus blossoms mingled with the dry musk of stone, carrying a bittersweet whisper that danced just beyond the edges of your awareness. A steady rhythm pulsed beneath the surface, a quiet urgency rippling through the air, threading through the statues and frescoes, as if the very stones trembled beneath your feet. You exhaled slowly, breath pooling like warm silk in your chest, as the figure stepped closer, their presence folding gently into the shadow of the chamber. The cool touch of your staff against the worn stone marked the pace of your approach, a deliberate cadence in tandem with the temple's slow, ancient song. The faint rustle of fabric whispered between you, carrying with it the scent of aged parchment and a faint trace of sandalwood. Your eyes traced the faint outline of a scroll partially unfurled in the figure's hands, delicate edges worn and softened by time. The papyrus carried the scent of earth and incense, a fragile vessel for knowledge long hidden beneath layers of dust and silence. The shadows curled around the figure's form, draping them like a cloak stitched with secrets whispered in forgotten tongues. A breath brushed your cheek, cool and almost tender, stirring the fine hairs at your neckline. The air thickened, heavy with anticipation, urging your senses to sharpen, each inhale a slow filing of awareness as the chamber seemed to draw itself tighter, like a trap sprung, but not yet sprung open. The distant bells tolled again, their resonance cutting clean through the quiet, a sudden note that fractured the stillness with unforeseen clarity. Your gaze flicked to the fractured dome overhead, light trembling as it sifted through cracks to settle in thin pools on the floor. The frescoes curled faintly in that scattered sun, lotus petals curling delicately, their cold hues softened to muted blues and gentle earth tones, like the last breath of a dying dream. Each broken image seemed to pulse, vibrating faintly under your touch, even from a distance, as if the gods depicted there stirred with slow, reluctant awareness. The figure's lips moved silently, the barest hint of sound, a fragile thread weaving between the stone walls. Your breath hitched, the cool air thickening with the sharp tang of resin burned low, trailing wisps that lingered like memories hanging heavy. In that suspended moment, your hand tightened reflexively on the staff, knuckles paling against worn wood, steady and sure, a lifeline amid thin, cracking tension. Then the air shifted again, so subtle that it might have been a trick of your own senses. A sound barely there, a scrape or whisper near the chamber's far edge. You turned slowly, eyes narrowing as shadows flickered, and a subtle movement traced the outline of something just beyond sight. A low hum seemed to rise beneath the stones, vibrating through the floor in a pulse measured and slow, syncing with the quiet beat of your heart. A glint caught the corner of your vision. Your breath stalled. Fingers trembled as you extended your hand toward the dark recess, the cool stone beneath steadying your motion. The figure's gaze held yours, wide, cautious, and charged with a desperate hope. Before your fingers could close on the glimmering edge of an aged amulet nestled in the dust, the distant bells tolled once more, sharper now, splitting the silence like a sliver of lightning. And there, in the wavering light between shadow and stone, the fragile calm shattered, unfolding into a silence so profound it swallowed everything whole. You sensed it then, a presence heavy and ancient, stirring just beyond the veil, waiting. You reached out, fingers trembling, as they brushed against the cool stone beneath layers of dust. The faint glimmer of the amulet, nestled in the shadowed crevice, caught the reluctant light. A small, unassuming piece, yet heavy with the whispered weight of centuries. As your hand closed around it, the air seemed to shift, a subtle tremor running beneath your bare feet, threading through the ancient stones like a breath exhaled long after the temple's last prayer. The figure beside you stepped forward, their gaze steady and patient, a reflected calm in the face of the unseen currents that stirred within the chamber. The soft rustle of linen carried the promise of shared purpose, of secrets folded gently into the dawn of understanding. You felt the cool polish of Thoth's statuette warm in your palm, a quiet anchor amid the unraveling stillness. With the amulet in hand, a delicate pulse echoed faintly beneath the temple's skin, the heartbeat of a long-forgotten continuum, awakening slowly from its slumber. The faded frescoes around you seemed to breathe, their muted blues and pale earth tones pulsing with the rhythm of a story now unfolding, the cycle drawing to its close. The lotus petals curled softly along chipped walls, their fragile grace unchanged despite the relentless passage of time. Together, you and the figure moved toward the altar, each step measured and reverent. The soft echo of distant bells wove a fragile thread through the chamber, a reminder that outside, life's relentless pace was slowly stirring once more. Here, within this hallowed silence, a pause had been won, a moment suspended between what was lost and what might yet be reclaimed. You placed the amulet gently upon the altar's rough surface, its presence grounding the whispers that danced like displaced shadows through the sanctuary. The air grew lighter, the thick veil of tension lifting, as if the temple itself sighed softly, releasing centuries of quiet watchfulness. In the calm that settled, the faintest trace of jasmine lingered, like a breath held and given back. Again, a gentle exhale that spoke of peace regained. The figure met your eyes, and in that quiet exchange, you sensed the closing of a circle. The mysteries once veiled in shadow now lay revealed, not in loudly spoken truths, but in the delicate harmonies of understanding, acceptance, and the patient unfolding of what must be remembered. The temple, too, seemed to lean into that silence, its stones warmed by the slow return of the sun's rays, casting soft gold across fractured frescoes that smiled faintly in the fading light. Outside, the temple grounds slowly awakened, the muted stir of life returning in careful steps and whispered prayers. The barking dogs resumed their quiet chorus, and the clatter of sandals resumed along stone paths worn smooth by time. These familiar sounds embraced the sanctuary as guardians of a fragile equilibrium, gentle echoes in the stillness. After the storm, you stood a moment longer by the altar, fingers brushing the cold stone one last time. The air carried the sweet breath of lotus and old resin, the scent threading through you like a lullaby, drawing the day gently toward its close. The tension that had gripped your chest softened, unfolding into a calm certainty, the kind that comes only when the weight of waiting dissolves into quiet resolve. The figure stepped back, their form dissolving slowly into the muted light, filtering through the fractured dome. The delicate shift in the air, the gentle rustle of fabric, carried a silent farewell, but not goodbye. Instead, it was an invitation to journey onward, the first soft notes of a new song, composed in the shadows of what had been, and the promise of what will be. You inhaled deeply, the cool air full of earthy musk and sweet incense filling your lungs. The temple's stones, worn and resolute, seemed to hum with an ancient melody, steady, enduring, a cadence older than memory. You pressed your palm once more against the altar, the roughness a tangible reminder of all who had come before and all who would come after. Outside, the distant bells tolled a final measured call, their sound folding neatly into the gathering dusk. The desert wind carried a gentle coolness, sweeping in through narrow corridors and shifting linen curtains with tender breath. The sky, stretched vast and silent, deepened into shades of indigo and muted gold, a vast canvas upon which this moment settled softly, like a benediction. You took a step back from the altar, the cool stone beneath your bare feet, steady and sure. Your fingers lingered briefly on the statuette of Thoth, now warm with the heat of hope and time. Its smooth surface, a quiet companion through the twists of fate. The temple exhaled with you, a slow release of breath that carried the weight of ages. The shadows lengthened, folding softly like a worn blanket, and the silence settled deep, not as absence, but as presence, a companion for the coming night. You felt it then, the delicate pulse of completion threading through the space, a whisper that wound gently into the smallest corners and quiet places. With that, you closed your eyes briefly, the echo of temple bells ringing softly still in your mind, the lingering scent of lotus petals fading into night. Your breath slowed, steady as stone, steady as earth, steady as the unbroken promises held within the temple's ancient walls. The story had found its rest, and so do you. Good night.